chances are pretty good, I think, that if you're watching this, you have some student loans. As of the end of 2020, the total amount that Americans have in student loan debt is something like $1.57 trillion. For a lot of folks that I work with, a lot of people I see posting online, having student loan debt is an obstacle to living the life that they want, whether that's a life of travel, that's buying a house, that's moving abroad. But today we're going to talk about what are your options when it comes to travel and moving abroad if you do have student loan debt. If you're new here, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Adelia Borishade, aka Picky Girl Travels the World. I help Black women master their money so that they can live the life of their dreams. My clients include women who are pursuing financial independence, who want to travel, or who even want to move abroad. I'm all about helping women navigate the intersection of finances and travel. If you are thinking about moving abroad, be sure to grab a copy of the Ultimate Move Abroad Checklist. I'll link it here and I will link it down below in the description. We're going to get started by talking about what are your options for dealing with your student loan debt. Be sure to watch all the way to the end of the video so that you can catch my interview with Tiffany, who is currently just 13 payments away from having her student loans be totally forgiven. You won't want to miss that piece. It's also important to note that your options depend on the type of loan you have. Those of you who have private loans have significantly fewer options than the people who have public or federal loans. Also keep in mind, this video is not intended to be financial advice. I am a financial educator. I am educating you and sharing knowledge. I am not giving you advice, okay? All right, so your first option to deal with your student loan debt is to simply walk away, to not pay it. But for every action, there is a reaction and there are consequences. And like I mentioned before, there are some differences here between if you choose to walk away from your private student loans versus what happens if you walk away from public loans. So let's talk about private loans first. Okay, so you don't pay your private student loans. They become overdue, they become delinquent, you default on them. Sort of like when you don't pay a credit card bill or some other kind of debt. It is going to be reported to the credit reporting agencies. It will go on your credit report. It's going to hurt you if you want to apply for any kind of loan, okay? Also know that there are certain employers that do check prospective employees' credit reports. So having defaulted student loans, delinquent student loans, that can come back to bite you in the butt there too. Now, if you don't pay your private student loan, you can be sued by the lender. So you can be sued up until the statute of limitations on the debt runs out. It varies from one state to another. It's generally somewhere between 3 to 10 years. For example, in the state of Texas, private student loan debt in the state of Texas, you can be sued for 4 years. How does that compare to other debts? If you owe state tax debt, 3 years, they can sue you for that. Medical debt is 4 years. Auto loan debt, retail installment debt is 4 years. That's Texas. Some states are shorter, some states are longer. Okay, so you need to know about the state that you live in. You can be sued. They can take you to court and the court can order you to pay. Okay, that's a possibility. But some people think, oh, well, if I'm moving abroad, let them sue me. I ain't got no money anyway. That's a personal choice. Okay. I'm just here to tell you what happens if you choose that route. Typically, these kinds of things, defaulted private student loans will stay on your credit report for about 7 years, and it should fall off. Don't think that means, oh, okay, so after 7 years, they're not coming for me. They can always continue to try to collect that debt. And if that means sending you annoying mail, making obnoxious phone calls, all of that, all of the tricks that they use to try and collect the debt, yeah, they can still do that. However, after the statute of limitation runs out on the debt, you cannot be sued, and it should be removed from your credit report in 7 years. Now, if you have multiple loans, each loan is going to be dealt with individually. And again, remember, we're talking about private loans here. Now, if you have public student loan debt, that debt is going to follow you to the grave. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. Here's the thing. If you don't pay back a public, say you don't make a payment, within 90 days, you are labeled delinquent. They report to the big 3 credit reporting agencies. If your payment is 270 days late, it is officially considered to be defaulted, and they probably, whoever you owe that money through, will probably turn it over to collections. This is where it's a little different than with private loans. Uncle Sam wants his money. I've told you all this before in previous videos. If you have a student loan in default, the US government can seize your tax return as part of your repayment. They can garnish your wages. Okay, these are things that private lenders can't do, but because this is the federal government, they can come after their money. And the debt never really goes away. And this is true if somebody co-signs. If someone co-signs on that federal student loan for you and you default, then they are on the hook for it, and it does not go away. I'll give you an example. A guy took out a student loan for $1,500 and didn't pay it for whatever reason for 29 years. Literally 29 years later, he's getting out of the car, and there are armed US Marshals there to arrest him because the federal government had taken him to court. He did not appear. There were arrest warrants issued for him. You know, it kept escalating to this one day, because he was like, I was about to get my gun because I'm trying to figure out why y'all are here at my house. Turns out he hadn't paid back a $1,500 student loan from 29 years. When he goes to court to pay it, of course, there's 29 years of interest and late fees and all of that added onto it. But I'm telling you this story, I'm sharing this story with you because you need to understand that federal student loan debt does not go away. It does not disappear. As I said before, I cannot give you advice on whether or not this is the right approach for you. Just understand that if you choose not to pay a student loan back, whether it is private or federal, there are going to be repercussions for that choice, particularly the damaging of your credit. And I know it is so easy to believe, well, I'm going to move abroad. I'm not going to be in the US, so who cares about my credit? I mentioned this to y'all in my other video, which if you haven't watched it, you definitely need to. I'll link it here and I'll link it below. These are the 10 money moves you need to make before you move abroad, okay? Because Uncle Sam still will be in your pocket, trust me. There are 2 other programs that we're going to talk about today that if you have federal student loans, you can either significantly reduce the amount that you have to pay to keep your loans in good standing or have your debt forgiven. If you have private student loans, that's not really an option for you. The more popular option, see, I almost gave advice. I can't give advice. The more popular option seems to be refinancing private student loan debt. And remember that refinancing student loan debt and consolidating student loan debt are 2 separate things. you are familiar with like refinancing a house, refinancing a car, you can do that with a particular student loan. You can combine student loans. That would be a consolidation. Now, if you choose to pursue or you're considering pursuing refinancing of a private student loan, it's like getting a loan from a private lender like you would for other things. There are going to be requirements. First of all, you have to have the right kind of loans. That's one of the things you will hear over and over in this video is, what kind of loans do you have? Because that will determine your options. So you have to have the right kind of loans. You have to have a credit score in the 600s, at least high 600s. You need to have enough money that you can actually afford to pay your debt. So they want to look at, like your financial situation, and you need a degree from a qualifying college. If that sounds intriguing, like that's a possibility, definitely I encourage you to do your own research and find out more about refinancing options. If you've got federal loans and you're thinking, can I refinance? Yes, you can. But this is an important but. If you refinance a public student loan, it in essence becomes private because your new lender is a private lender. And so you will lose some of the possible benefits that I'm getting ready to talk about if you refinance a public student loan. And again, that's not the same as consolidating public student loans. That's a different thing. Let's talk about what are some of those options you have to either get rid of the debt or pay significantly less. And this is for the folks with federal student loans. One option you have is income-driven replacement. Now, there are 4 different programs that will restructure the debt, change the amount you have to pay, how long you have to pay, based on your income. There is the income contingent repayment plan. There is the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan, the revised pay-as-you-earn payment plan, and the one we're going to talk about in more detail, the income-based repayment plan. Now, remember I said a whole lot is going to depend on the kind of loans you have. If you have plus loans that were taken, that you were the parent and took them out, this does not apply to you. If your loans are in default currently, you cannot do the income-based repayment plan. What is the income-based repayment plan? Well, like the name says, your monthly payments are going to be based on your income. You can apply for this program and have your payments reduced to either 15% or 10% if you're a new borrower of your discretionary income divided by 12. So 15% of your discretionary income divided by 12, that's roughly what your new payment would be. This particular payment plan is for both FFEL program and direct loans. Like I said before, if you've got a parent plus loan or you've got consolidated loans and there is a parent plus loan in there, you can't do this. They look at your discretionary income, 15% or 10% times 12, divided by 12. You make that payment on time for 20 or 24 years. It depends on how old the loan is. If your loan was dispersed before July 1st of 2014, you get 20 years. If your loan was dispersed after July 1st, 2014, you get 25 years to repay. So you must make on-time payments for 20 or 25 years. Then your loan will be forgiven. With the income-based repayment plan, they are going to significantly reduce the amount you pay, but you must pay on time for 20 to 25 years. If you have done that, you go through the process, they will wipe out the debt. There's a small catch. The amount that they wipe out is considered to be income and you'll be taxed on it. So if you've got $300,000 in student loan debt that they forgive, at some point. I'm unsure as to whether you're being taxed on this per year or at the end of 25 years. I don't know. That piece I can't quite find the details on yet, but you will have to pay some taxes on that. This program is available for both undergraduate and graduate loans. So far, we've had two options. You can either walk away from your student loans. If you've got certain kinds of federal loans, you can do an income-based repayment plan. Remember, I said, keep watching because I have an interview with Tiffany, who has done the third option, which is public student loan forgiveness. Okay, so public student loan forgiveness, if you work full-time, that's more than 30 hours at a public entity. That can be for the US government, that could be something like the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, or any 501c3, like nonprofit, official nonprofit. You qualify as being in public service. You need to make 120 payments. That's 10 years. And you must be enrolled in the income-based repayment plan. So for 10 years, you're making smaller payments. After you've made your 120 payments and you apply, you go through the process, and Tiffany talks about this, you will have that debt forgiven, whatever is outstanding. Here, you don't have to pay taxes. The idea is if you're in public service, you're already making less money. And you're giving back to society. So they shorten the period and you're not penalized with the taxes. Remember, there are restrictions on the kind of federal student loan you can have and do this program. So here's Tiffany sharing her experience with the public student loan forgiveness program. You have student loans. Now, I don't know how much about the number and the amount you are comfortable sharing, but whatever you are comfortable sharing about that amount, like were they for undergraduate, were they for graduate, how much, the kind, any of that you could share, I would appreciate.
I am my life is given to education, right? So I've worked in education. This is my 11th school year of welcoming students and being super excited. My background's in counseling, and so I've always served as either a school counselor, college counselor, mental health counselor. Those are the three realms that I've done. So in terms of student loans, I had around 10,000 from undergrad because I really wanted to study abroad, of course. And I also wanted to do it in the summertime. And so there's no financial aid in the summer. And so I had to take out loans. I remember calling my mom and I was like, hey, I need 5G. She was like, what?
What you think this is?
I was like, girl, ain't enough church dinner functions we could raise this money for. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just take out a loan. And, obviously at 18, 19, I didn't understand the concept of money. Now I deal with it all the time in conversations with kids and stuff like that. But I just didn't know. I was like, how come she doesn't have $5,000? This doesn't make sense. But again, concept, money, bills, groceries are expensive. I was talking to somebody who lives overseas yesterday, and we were just talking a little bit about the price of groceries as an adult and what we now know it as. But so I had 10,000 from there. And then I went to grad school at Howard, and first in my family to go to college. And so first in my family to go to grad school as well, and just didn't understand the concept of an assistantship or anything like that. So I ended up taking out around $60,000 for 1 year because tuition was around $35,000, and to live in DC is $20,000, so I think whatever the max was, I took it out. Thankfully, after my first year, I ended up becoming a resident director in the dorm. So I got that paid for. But as a first gen student, when I showed up, I didn't know that was a thing. So I was asking everyone as a bond, how much money did you take out in loans? And they're like, girl, none. I was like, wait, what? They're like, no, we have an assistantship. And I was like, ooh, I should probably go look up what that word means. Because, I just didn't know. My mom did come with me to Howard. She did come with me to visit a couple other schools that I wanted to go to for grad school. But just the social capital, we just didn't know.
But that you just said, you were the first in your family. So if you don't know someone personally that has done it, you don't know to ask about those kinds of things.
Exactly. All I knew were loans because originally I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I remember reading all these articles that like, oh, if you go to law school, med school, vet school, any of those professional schools, there's like no financial aid, right? Although we know there's like special programs, but the majority of people do leave with loans. So I think like I took that into the work with like scholarship, like going that route with research. And so ended up finding out. So in total, when I finished grad school, I probably had like with the interest, I don't know like how that works. They were all government loans. So no private loans. I have no experience with private loans, thankfully. So all of them were like the subsidized or unsubsidized government, like grad plus loan. And then I had like the Perkins loan and whatever the one for undergrad is, maybe like Sally Mae's like grad loan. So what happened was my first year, I ended up working at a university. So in my 11 years, half of it was at a university. I worked with first year college students, like when they were on campus and helping them to transition as a counselor. And then I worked at a high school for the last whatever year. So this is my 12th year. So yeah, 6 and 6 about.
When you took out these loans, did you give any thought to how you were going to pay them back other than I will graduate and I'll get a job and I'll make the payments?
Yeah, that was it. I was like, oh, must be normal. Like everybody's taking these out. And yeah, I guess I didn't even know the breakdown of how much it would be per month, which we'll talk about. But I just had no understanding. I just thought like this was part of the package. So what happened was you got accepted to grad school, and then you have to, like, as part of your enrollment, you had to sign these documents that say, oh, okay, like sign these loan entrance exams. So I was like, oh, this is part of like the thing. I didn't really conceptualize it. You know, they call that part the loan counseling, the entrance counseling and the exit counseling. And there was no one that really counseled me. It was just more like this, like kind of like automated program. You like click yes, 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 and then you sign your name, and then you get your funds released, and it goes to the school, and you know, you're just like, oh, okay, this is all done. So no, I had no clue. I just assumed that was like the way. In order to gain knowledge, you had to take out loans.
And like you said, it's basically presented that way, like, oh, if you can't write us a check, you need to get a loan.
Yeah. Had no clue. And even honestly, when I finished Howard, I still didn't have a clue. All I knew was I owed, like, at this point was like 12,000 with undergrad and the 70,000 with grad school.
For 1 year. Oh my God.
Right?
Oh my God.
1 year. But in my head, I thought I was going to be like a millionaire because I thought everybody that went to college was rich.
Because that is also what we have been told. Like, because that's what I feel. And again, I don't have personal experience with this, but my friends who took out loans, and I have friends who, she was like, I don't have money this semester. Let me go see what kind of loan they will give me. The idea, all I ever heard them talk about was, as long as I stay enrolled, payments aren't due and there's no interest. And it was like, assuming I graduate and I'll get a job and I'll be able to pay for it. Like, that's as deep as it went.
Because you don't even know like how much your parents make, you know? So all I knew was like, okay, they didn't go to college, whatever they make, I'm going to make so much more. And now I'm going to grad school. Girl, I want to be a millionaire. Like, I can pay these loans back in 1 year.
Yeah, so whatever these loans are, it's no big deal. It's not going to matter.
No big deal. What a mistake, right? Like, such a mistake. But I ended up transitioning back to Connecticut. That's where I'm from. So I went to undergrad. I did go to a state school, which is why my loans weren't as hefty. My dad's job had some program for employees. And so I got to get a lot of my undergrad paid for through that. And then just through like, you know, Pell Grant, you know, just because of income, like all the little things. And then for grad school, those benefits were only for undergrad. So it didn't like transition to grad school. So I moved back to Connecticut where I had my first job. And for the first 6 months, I think it was up until my parents were like, we're going to start charging you to live here. I was like, charging me to live here? I was like, what? I was like, I'm getting my own place. You know, I was like, this is not what? I was like, what is happening? Come to find out, my dad was like, yeah, I was just gonna like put the money away and give it back to you, but I wanted you to start being responsible. But I was just through, I was like 25, 26. I was like, you can charge me? I was so upset. And so I ended up moving around the corner because my parents lived across the street from where I worked. So I was like, I'm not going to live too far because I don't want to have to, do that. So anyways, in the 6 months that I had lived with them, I wasn't making a lot. I'll be very transparent. My first job, even though I had a master's degree, and this is important for people to know, in the field of education, my first job made like $37,000.
That's more than I made.
I was like, what? Like $37,000 for having a master's? But again, I didn't know anyone who had it. I didn't know about like how to negotiate my salary. I didn't know anything. And so, I stayed home and cost of living was like my costs were very low. Someone had also gifted me, like they had just brought a new car when I was living in DC. So my homegirl, she gave me her old car. It was like older, but worked. It got me across the street and back. And so I didn't have really any expenses. So I paid off in those 6 months the loans that I had from undergrad. So every piece of my check, maybe my parents thought I was like living it up, but like literally every single thing that I had, I went to loans. So I think it's important to say that before I got my master's degree, I realized I was going to be the first person that would make $1 million. So I took this class when I was in DC. It was called Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey. So he's like a financial guru. People either love him or hate him depending on their money philosophy. But he taught me a little bit about this thing called the snowball effect. And it was like pay off your lowest amount of debt first. And I didn't have any other debt but loans. Pay that off first and then build some momentum so that you could like hit up the bigger debt. He also talks about like trying to pay for things that are depreciative and cash. Having a savings and emergency fund. So I got my emergency fund, which was $1,000. And then they say 3 to 6 months of living expenses, but I didn't really have any. So I just put like maybe 5,000 away. And then once that happened, every single check I would just give to Sally Mae, so ended up paying that off rather quickly, thankfully, because I lived at home. And then it was this like bulk of a loan of like $70,000 because, with interest and everything, now it was 70.
And so let me ask you, what was your interest rate? Do you know?
I think it was whatever the fixed one was. I can't remember if it's like 6.8% or 3.2. It's one of the two. I don't know where I'm getting those numbers from.
Okay.
But it's less than 7% and it's not fluctuating. So it's fixed. So the difference between, because I work at a high school as a counselor, so I teach this stuff now in depth. Like I go out of my way to teach finances for college. So private loans are fluctuating with the market.
Okay.
So they can go up as high as like, like we see our credit card bills, like 19, 20%. So thankfully, the saving grace was that I didn't have any private loans. I probably wouldn't have gotten approved because I didn't have any credit, so banks probably wouldn't have given me any, but I only took out exactly what I needed as well. I wasn't trying to like live it up. So when I started to do research, I remember like hearing about the public service loan forgiveness. This is like the end of 2012. So I started working at this job in 2011, and the public service loan forgiveness program is for nonprofits. Now, if you are like, don't have a lot of information about nonprofits, you just assume all nonprofits are like people who are like rugging it and like, helping the community. 99.9% of universities and schools are nonprofits. And so I was like, no. I was like, it's not nonprofit. I was like, our president like drives a designer car, makes a ton of money. Like we have a football program, our football coach makes this. And the other thing was I was at a private university. So I was like, okay, cool. Like University of Connecticut, University of Maryland, UCLA, like all of those. Okay, cool. It's for the public good, but I'm at a private one. And whoever answered the phone that day, I was so thankful. She was like, no. Like universities are 501c3. And so I was like, well, wait, what exactly is the 501c3? I thought it was like, you had to like not get paid for the work. Like they can't make any money. And I'm like, our tuition at the time was like $65,000.
We could get into a whole nother tangent about how you can be charging people 65 grand and paying coaches and folks millions of dollars and still be a nonprofit. But
Yeah. So the lady, she was like, no, she was like, so a nonprofit, all it means is that 100% of the money has to be used by the end of the year and it has to go towards the mission. So the mission could mean educating, giving kids opportunities like sports. So you can pay personnel in order to make that mission. So salaries are included in the, the piece. It's not necessarily having to give back to like the least of these or the most vulnerable, right? Which is what I thought. So that was a game changer. Let me tell you, after that, I literally started to run like workshops on my campus. I was working at. And I was like, hey, we all are making pennies, not millions of dollars. We're making pennies and we can all benefit from this if you obviously meet the criteria. So what's the criteria? The criteria is you have to have federal loans. You can't have any private. And you have to work somewhere for 10 years.
Now, you deciding to pursue this, was it just like, this is a lot of money I owe, and if I can find because again, you're not making $1 million. Is that what made you kind of go down this road?
I think it made sense, right? So I knew that I would be in the educational field in some way, shape, or form. I didn't even know I would go to K through 12. I loved higher ed. I loved working there. So I was like, I'm going to do this anyway for 10 years. I might as well get the benefit. So the thing that I remember my first boss, I like walked her through the program. So she only had like $25,000 of student loans, right? Only. But the amount that she made, so how the public service loan forgiveness program works is they take your standard payment. So my standard payment, if I just went on the 10-year repayment plan, was $790 a month. I was like, what?
Is 10 years the standard repayment plan?
Yes. So people have 10 years to like, if they're going about it, right, when they're like when they get that like kind of buffer between graduation and starting, if they don't defer the loans, you have 10, it's basically they divide your amount with like presumed interest because it's fixed by 10 years. And in 10 years, your balance will be zero. So there's the standard repayment plan. My standard repayment plan was let's just say $700 for a whole number. Now, then they take into account for public service loan forgiveness, your salary. So if they were to do an income-based repayment plan, really with $36,000 a year, I only was required to pay like $190. So the easiest way to explain it is they take 700 minus 190, and every month you have a balance. That balance goes into a pool that will later be forgiven. Okay. Now, every year they're going to ask for my salary because now my salary has more than doubled. So now I'm paying a reflection of the salary, which is around $300. And I'll talk about living overseas, but the technical piece is it will go up, but it will never, ever be $790. So whatever the balance is, they'll forgive. Now, my boss, just to give you an understanding, my boss only owed, I need to use whole numbers because numbers confuse me.
I was going to say, I can't help you with the math.
Yeah, let's just say she owed $20,000, right? Just to use like a big number. And because she probably made at the time like $50,000, her standard repayment was probably at $20,000, like $190. Then she does income-based repayment and it's still $190. So there's no amount that's left over every month. So she doesn't technically qualify because she earns more than the amount that she owes. Like her ratio of debt to income is stronger on the income way. Mine was stronger on the debt way. So that's the part that people are like, oh, I tried to do public service loan forgiveness. I didn't qualify. I'm like, well, how much you making? Oh, you make $150 and you owe $40,000. Like, yeah, it's not going to make sense because there's no balance for you. But for other people on the flip side, it makes sense. So that's kind of how it works. And you have to work for 10 years. It doesn't have to be consecutive. So I could take a break for a year and still have all of my employment documents for 8 years, 9 years, take a break for a year. Let's say I have a kid, I'm not working, and come back, I can work one other year and put that in. It doesn't have to be 120 consecutive payments. It just has to be 120. Working for a nonprofit full time.
Working for a nonprofit. So,
and the other caveat that people don't know is you can have 2 jobs as long as it equates to full-time hours.
Okay.
So some people are like, oh, I don't have a full time, like I work, 20 hours at this nonprofit and 15 hours here. They both can fill out the paperwork. A lot of times with forgiveness, it's tax. And I know Biden is talking about not taxing forgiveness of loans, but right now the public service loan forgiveness is the only plan that's not taxable.
Okay.
So when they forgive 65,000 from me, I am wiped clean. Other people, when they do income based and they get some forgiveness or whatever happens, they have to claim that forgiveness as income, and then that income is taxed. So now they have to pay the taxes on it. So that's why for me, I don't necessarily recommend those. Not that I don't recommend, listen, get all the coins that you can, because whatever the taxes is still going to be significantly cheaper than what you had to pay. You might now be on another payment plan. But the thing is, for the public service loan forgiveness, it's not taxable. So it's literally a benefit to me, but I'm also choosing to work in places where they're going to pay me that amount.
Yes. Okay.
So, but for me, I knew that was going to be what I was passionate about. So now I know, like, okay, there's different like parts of education that's nonprofit that I can make a little bit more. Like like I said, I'm definitely more than double, but I've also been in the field for 12 years and I have like lots of experience and expertise, but it made sense for me to enroll. It wouldn't make sense for me to not enroll because I already met both factors. My debt was significantly higher than my income. It will always be. And I was already working for a 501c3.
So yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer. Is there, that you know of, a limit to how much they can forgive? Okay.
No.
Okay.
Not for public service loan forgiveness. So if we're just focusing on that, no.
Okay.
Because there's doctors in the program.
Because that's what I was thinking about.
No, because remember, technically hospitals are also 501c3s for the most part. Many of them are 501c3s, even like Yale University's hospitals, 501c3. So I grew up in the backdrop of Yale. So that's always going to be my reference point.
Okay.
So that's like, I'm from New Haven, so that's where Yale is. And so that was literally like, oh, wow. But again, if you're an anesthesiologist, you're making $500,000 and your loan is only $200,000, then, not the same. You probably can't afford to, your lifestyle is definitely higher. So that's the part they don't consider, right? Like doctors have a different lifestyle. They have, other costs like malpractice insurance. They probably got to like drive a luxury car, they got to be part of that life. Ain't nobody expecting me to pull up in no Porsche, right?
Okay. Now, where are you in the process? Because you're supposed to do it for 10 years, make 120 payments. How close are you to the end?
I am so close. I am at payment 107.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 107, and it's been great because this is where I can talk a little bit about living overseas. So I work for a organization, a high school, that is a 501c3 in the US. So for most people, when they live overseas, a couple of things is going to happen. They're either going to work for a company that's in the US that sent them overseas, AKA what we consider like an expat, immigrant, whatever, or they're going to just be a digital nomad, right? So if you're a digital nomad, you're not in the question because you're not a nonprofit employee. So we'll just focus on people who work for companies in the US who are going overseas. If your company is a 501c3, then boom, you still keep that because you still work for that company and that company has to be in the US. There are many companies. So like I work for an international high school. Some like my top choice at the time before I heard about this one, because I'm super nomadic, was an international school at Dakar in Senegal. That's where I was like, oh, I had, like I said, never heard of the school that I work for. So that school was like, oh, that's where I want to be. So I looked it up, but they're actually registered in the US as a 501c3. So sometimes you just have to do some digging, even if you get a job overseas. A lot of times their business structure is in the US. So if it is in the US and it's a 501c3, you can still make your payments and it will still qualify as the 120.
Okay. So if you had worked for an international school abroad that was not headquartered and basically had their structure set up in the US, this would be kind of considered like as a break. So the payments you had made would count. you would still be on income-based repayment, but you wouldn't be doing the public service loan forgiveness unless you then resumed working for a nonprofit of some type.
In the US.
In the
US.
US.
And it's important to note that like there's tons of people that have worked at a nonprofit in the US that were not on a qualified payment plan. So there's no way to retroactively go back to that. Right. Okay. So it's like, again, it's like knowledge. This is why like social capital is so big, which is why when I found out, I was like, hey, anyone want to know about this? Because like you need to get this done. But again, if you can't retroactively put yourself on a income-based plan. So you don't know, you're just like, man, I want to hurry up and get these student loans off. You're on a standard payment plan. You want to retroactively, you can't. So we can't assume that just because they work for a nonprofit in the US, that they were making the right payments under the income-based payment plan. We can't assume that. They have to be both together, because that's why I still have payments left, even though I'm over the 12 years.
Okay. But when you decided to go abroad, assuming that you were already part of the public service loan forgiveness,
it would be a break.
It would be a break. Okay. Now, this is kind of a tangential question, but because the company that you work for is technically an American company, do you still get to do a foreign earned income exemption?
So that's the best part. Okay. So because of that, I'm not taxed in the US. Now, when you think about income-based repayment plans, it has to go on income. But what is the taxable income, which is what they use? Mine is zero.
Because you file an FEIE, which exempts up to, I believe it's about $108,000 of income this year.
More than enough for me.
Yeah, no, because I taught overseas too. Like I was never in danger of hitting the limit. Okay.
Never in danger, right?
Never in danger.
So that's the best part, because anything times zero is going to be zero. I don't do math in public, but what I do know.
I feel you on that.
And so, yes. So my student loan payment since working there and getting the approval, because it takes a year, has been $0. Now, also the rest of us is $0 now too, because of COVID. I believe since March of 2020, it's been zero, but all of our payments still count.
Okay. And that's was going to be my next question, was how has that impacted you? Because I believe there's no interest accruing. And I think on federal loans, they don't have to make payments either.
There's no payments unless for federal. Again, Biden can't control the banks. So
we're not talking about private loans.
No, we're just talking about federal loans. All of my payments are already zero because of my job, but they're also zero because of Biden. And they made sure to write in the language that because remember, my $0 payments counted towards my calculations. Yes. So these $0 payments also count towards calculation.
Okay.
So we haven't lost. So basically again, it will be zero for me anyway, but for anyone who is like working in the US, it's been amazing for them, because if they had to pay $200, $300, $400 a month, it's been zero since March 2020. And
they've
now
not been accruing
until January.
Yeah, and they've not been accruing interest.
The interest doesn't matter to us because
I'm thinking about somebody who is not on a payment plan. Somebody who's just trying to thug it out.
Oh yeah. I'm just thinking about the public service, because I know that's the focus. So I was like, yeah, for us the interest doesn't matter, because all of that's getting rolled over to forgiveness. So so no interest, no big deal for us. That's why my balance is still the same, because it's like literally I'm only paid whatever the interest. So $0. We check it off each month. And like I said, for those people that are public service over, here in the US, it's been a blessing, because from March 2020 until January 2022, which is when it just been extended, I don't know the math of that, but that's a lot of months.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. It is. It is
amazing.
Now, what happens in
13 months, girl.
Okay, because I thought it was 13, but then I was having to check my math, because I was like, is it? Okay, so what happens in 13 months?
That math I know. Listen,
okay.
I got like little ticks on my arm, you know what I mean? Like little tattoos just counting over. No, I'm just kidding. But 13, you don't got to worry about that one. I got it. So in 13 months, I do what I always do. I make my $0 payment, or, if my payments change because of life or whatever. So instead of saying in 13 months, I'll say after 13 more payments, right? Just because, like, again, if a break happens or something happens. So after 13 more payments, what will happen is I do exactly what I've always done. So every year I just have it on my calendar to have my employer fill out my employment certification form. So my employment certification form, I have basically 4 years, or maybe 3 years at the university, because again, I didn't know about the program the first 2 years. And then I have 2 years at another high school, and then 3-4 years, something like that, 3.5 years at the school I'm at now, 4 years. So basically I'll have them fill it out. They just need to say that I'm still working there, and they'll have it. So when I go on my portal, it shows them that at the university that I was working at, I made around 36 or 40 payments there. And then at the other high school I was at, I made 24. And then at this high school, so then they're just going to keep tallying it. If I go to another school, they have it. So already in my portal, I have the tracker, and they tell me when I can submit for forgiveness. So I'm going to do that again on basically after the last month, after my payment clears, I'll submit the employment certification form, so that way they can see that I was working there, so it matches up. Because remember, it has to be the right loan, the right employment, the right payment plan. So they'll have all of that. And then they have a forgiveness form. So because of COVID, I know, like, I'm part of a group on Facebook that's like for people who are like going through the process, and they share their like success, and like, oh, it seems like it takes around like 6 months to kind of get it approved. So the advice that I've seen in the group is that you should just keep making your payments. So whatever payments you make, they'll refund back to you.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, for example, I had made a payment in March 2020 because I have the automatic payment set up for my loans. And that's like, it went through, and then Biden made that rule that those payments wouldn't count. So they just sent me a check.
Okay.
So that's what will happen as well.
So would you continue making $0 payments?
It's automatic. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's like, I just wouldn't stop the system. But if I work somewhere else and I have to make a payment, then I would just make those payments and then just wait for the refund or whatever. Because every year you should do one thing and you have to do another. So the first thing you have to do is attach your tax return to the system so they can figure out your new income-based payment. The second thing you should do that I recommend is to do that employment certification form every year, so your tally could line up. But I have my own spreadsheet. I look at it like every month, and I like cross off the month like every time. So that's how I know where I am. But yeah, I mean, I would have saved. I mean, if I think about how much I probably paid over the 10 years, I would say it's been around, oh Lord, I don't know. So 250 times 100 is what? Almost
Add 2 zeros.
Yeah, right.
So
I would have paid $25,000.
Okay.
And they're gonna, at the end of the day, I would have still paid that because that would have been the interest.
Yes, on top of what you initially owed.
Exactly.
So basically you will get to walk away only paying the interest instead of the interest and the principal, which would have been a lot.
They're gonna forgive around 90.
Okay.
Because the balance is still going up.
Okay.
Right. So they're in my $0 payments, they're definitely not hitting anything. So not even the interest at this point. So it's definitely going up. So they'll forgive around 90, which is amazing. And 250 on average a month, like it might be a little bit less with all these $0. Maybe I'm paying around like 20,000 over 10 years. But it's like, when I think about paying on average around like $200 a month for, I spend that on my Geico or,
Well, no, if that's the payment you could have made, you would have, the trade-off would have been basically, this would be going with you probably for the next 30 years,
Until I became a millionaire.
Yes. I remember hearing I remember there was this whole thing about some loan forgiveness program where people were not getting approved. Was that this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think in the beginning, everybody was like, oh, I work for a hospital. It was a lot of doctors and lawyers, and they didn't do a lot of the paperwork, and the process wasn't as, I don't want to say as transparent, because when I got in the program around 2000, into 2012, it was pretty transparent. Like with the documents and being able to track and stuff. But I think it was just like a new program that people were learning on the go. I believe the first group of people couldn't even qualify for approval until 2017. So really, we're just like thinking, if we think back to it, really the program from 2007 to 2017 was all like, those people were brand new.
And I get the impression it was a lot of, not sure. Let's see.
Try it out.
And because I when you say 2017, I want to say it was around then that I started to see like, oh, only like 3% of the people were getting approved. And on the outside looking at that, I thought, well, that's shitty. Not realizing that, yeah, it's one of those things where you have to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. You have to make sure that you, like you said, the right kind of loan, the right kind of repayment process, that you're keeping track of officially, submitting the documentation to keep track of where you're working and how long you're working. Okay.
I would say now in the group, even in the Facebook group I'm in, like you see like people every day, like, I got my forgiveness or, whatever. So I would say like solid around 2010 to 2020. Like once the kinks were out, the excitement was away, they had the process. Because when I came in, everything was super clear. So when I came in late 2012, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew the paperwork, I had it signed. Also, another thing is employers like HR didn't always know how to fill out the form. So when these types of programs launch, you got to give it at least 3 years to like really get everybody on board. Because like, I remember when I first got the program, my HR person was like, I never seen this form. I don't know how to fill it out. And then I kept getting denied. And I'm like, no, we're a 501c3. But we kept checking the wrong box. And so the form was a little bit confusing. So now, because I know, I just fill it out and I'm like, here, just sign it. So again, it's like, how privy of information does this have? So like at my current job, the majority of our staff are not from the US. So the HR person doesn't even have to really deal with this form. So there's a lot going on, but I think the levels are pretty low. And also you have to remember that like the people who benefit with the debt income thing, there's so many other programs for teachers. So your K through 12 folks, a lot of them are going to go through that forgiveness program and not do something like this. A lot of people like me would never assume that a university is a 501c3 just because of the amount of the money and that like kids pay for tuition. And the lady had to teach me that on there too. And then hopefully people that work at like really grassroots 501c3s don't have $100,000 in loan debt. That's the hope. But if it was like me, I was like, no, I'm gonna be a millionaire or whatever. I'm gonna get multiple degrees, and I don't know when $1 million is gonna come. And when it does, we'll go back on your program and talk a little bit about how I made $1 million. I'm actually launching a program about like how to apply to colleges, and it's a huge part about finances in there. So if people want to, they have like rising high school seniors. Do you mind if I talk about that?
Yeah, no, please, right. That's fine.
Cool. So the best way to find me is on Instagram. I really only use Facebook for my mama. So Instagram is great. Tiff_tastic1, kind of like Tiff-tastic1, but there's an underscore. And there's a product I'm launching the beginning of next month. And it's basically a program called College Apps, your 12 steps of finding a match. And it's really to help rising high school seniors learn how to go through the college application process. But a huge part of that process, 2 lessons are really devoted to understanding financial aid. So that way students aren't like me thinking they're gonna make $1 million. There's one on careers, and like they have to research like what is the amount that you're gonna make to make a right decision, the best financial choice for you for your college. And then there's a part of the program, it's 12 lessons and it comes with a workbook. And there's one part that's going to be about how to understand your financial aid package once you get in. So making the savvy decision. And so I come from a very first gen perspective where I'm talking to students in a lingo that's not like assuming they know anything, right? And so it's like breaking everything down. And so that's going to launch. So you all, if you know anyone who's a high school, like rising senior, or someone about to go to college, even if it's an adult, this is the social capital that like, we just don't know. So I'll have information about that at the end of this month. So that's what I've been working on.
Does your program have a name?
Yes.
Yet? Okay,
yeah.
What is it called?
The organization's name is Uprooted Academy. And so that's the name. And then this program is just the first program is called College Apps, 12 Steps to Finding Your Match. So it's like a play on a dating app. So it's like swiping right for the school that you like. Is it worth it? Shoot your shot. So those are like kind of the names of the lessons. And it's first in a series. So the next series that will come out within a year is the honeymoon phase. So how to like survive and not just how to survive your first 100 days of college. And then the next one, because I know that transfer numbers are super high, is It's Me, Not You, how to approach transferring from your school.
Okay, guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope this provided you with information that is useful and will help you get started on your path to a life abroad or figuring out what the hell you're going to do about your student loans so that you can live the life that you want. I have a link in the description to the Facebook group that Tiffany mentioned, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program Support. That group on Facebook, I have a link in the description. I also have a link to Tiffany's Instagram if you want to follow her. And then, when her program launches, if you want to support that program or you know someone who's got a junior, senior in high school, definitely, because don't we all wish we had something like that when we were trying to go to school? Be sure, if you have not watched the video I did on the 10 money moves you need to make before you move abroad, make sure you watch that. Do you have any other questions about student loans? Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for all of your support. Please subscribe if you have not, like, share, all that good stuff, and I'll talk to y'all next time.